just started semi-seriously gardening this year. And so I needed a buddy of mine who's been gardening for years to help me out, help me get a good idea of what I need to do to make my garden good. So he loans me his tiller and I map out a little plot of earth in my backyard and I get to work, start tilling up the dirt. And he says, you want to make sure you get all that grass out, all those weeds out. Make sure that you're really cleaning out the soil so that you don't have to be fighting weeds all season long. Otherwise, it's going to be a nonstop headache for you. And I thought, it's not that big of a spot. Surely it can't be that big of a deal. Maybe he doesn't necessarily know what he's talking about. But he knew what he was talking about. I'm not really sure what I'm doing because I've never planted a garden before, but I go to the store, get the seed packs of the veggies that I want to put in my garden, and I plant them. But because I'm so unfamiliar with what I'm doing, I don't really pay attention to which seeds I put where, and I just kind of throw the rest of the bag, the little packets, in the garage somewhere. And as they start to grow, I start to think, oh, that's right, I planted zucchini over there. I planted some summer squash. Oh, some potatoes. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. But then there's this one plant that I can't quite figure out what it is. It's growing and it's looking green and lush and beautiful. And I think, oh wow, that's sweet. I wonder what that is. And it finally gets to the point where I'm like, yeah, I should probably know what's growing in my garden. So I go back into the garage, look at the seed packets, and I can't find anything that matches the description of this plant, this beautiful plant that's growing in my garden. So I ask my gardening buddy, hey, I got this plant and it's this thick stalk of a plant and it's growing and it has these really large, beautiful leaves that are coming off of it, and it's like over 4 feet tall. And it's growing and it's flourishing and I'm really excited. Do you know what it is? And he says to me, oh yeah, that's a weed. And I think, no, maybe I'm describing it wrong. Let me send you a picture. So I take a picture and I send it to him, and he responds with, yeah, that's a weed called butterprint. And I think, no, surely it's not a weed. I tilled my garden. I did the things that you're supposed to do to get the soil ready for a good, healthy garden. And this plant looks amazing. There's no way it's a weed. So I Google it, and he was right. Sure enough, it's a weed called butterprint. And so I have to go into my garden, and this thing that I had been nourishing, watering every day, this thing that I had been excited to watch it grow, this thing that I was very eager to see the type of fruit and veg that it was going to produce, this thing I was very proud to have in my garden, turned out to be devastating for my garden. You see, weeds kill the plants in your garden. They have devastating effects. They take nutrients away from the plants that you're trying to cultivate, the ones that you want in your garden. Sometimes weeds even get down, choke out, and kill the plants that you're trying to grow. So I said, okay, if I've got weeds in my garden, I need to probably make sure I know which is a weed and which isn't a weed. So I needed someone to tell me the things that I needed to remove from my garden, the things that were actually causing damage to my garden, maybe even things that I thought were good for my garden, the things I thought I wanted in my garden. Because sometimes weeds look beautiful. Sometimes weeds have flowers. Sometimes weeds are flowers. Sometimes weeds look like the plant that we're trying to grow. And sometimes weeds just grow so close to the base, to the root of the plant that you're trying to grow, that it's difficult to distinguish between the weed and the plant. And so sometimes we need somebody to come alongside of us and help us understand what's a weed and what actually belongs in the garden. Okay, I got weeds in my garden. Buddy, can you help me figure out which ones are weeds and which ones need to stay? Because I got to get the weeds out. And he says, yes, but you got to be very careful when you take out the weeds, because if you just yank out the weeds, they'll probably pull with them the good plants that you're trying to protect. So you have to be very careful. And he taught me that if you want to get the weed out, you're going to have to be very careful, and you want to cut close to the root, just below the surface, and just cut the weed as low as you can without disrupting the root system of the plant that you're trying to protect. Otherwise, you can kill the plant that you're trying to preserve while removing the weeds that kill it. Now, you can maybe let your weeds grow, and you might get a little feeble, measly ration of a carrot that you could eat. But if you want the county fair winner pumpkin, you've got to patiently, meticulously, and carefully remove the weeds from your garden. And then what can get tricky is because the weeds will probably grow back. And it can get real discouraging to keep working on weeding the garden. These weeds, they just keep coming back. I can't get rid of them. I recognize they don't belong in my garden, but I don't have the ability to keep them away from my garden. And so it'd be very easy to get caught up in this discouraging pattern and cycle and say, you know what, screw it. I'm just gonna let the weeds flourish. I'll risk everything in my garden because I just can't keep up with the weeds. But I guess it comes down to what type of garden do we really want? Because my garden is my garden, and I don't have to treat my garden the way that my garden expert buddy treats his garden. But he probably has a better idea of the best way to treat my garden. It makes me think of Jesus and how he gently comes and teaches us about the garden of our lives and those things that are good for us, those things that we might even value, the things that we nurture and are excited to see grow in our lives. And he sometimes comes along and says, yeah, but that's actually a weed and it doesn't belong there. But he's gentle and he doesn't simply rip them out, but he takes the time to weed and prune and go through. Even when we walk through life and we allow those things to return, he keeps taking the time to cut them back, to peel them back, to cut beneath the surface and work gently, graciously, and patiently with the weeds in our lives. But what do I know? I'm just some dumb Christian thinking about weeds in a garden. I love you guys. I'll catch you later.